Coming up, Florida tries to hold on to a quarterback this weekend while Tennessee deals with the aftermath of losing one. We'll talk about it all next on AT&T SEC Country Live. Hello everyone and welcome to AT&T SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. Good to have you with us. The final show for us before bowl games begin this weekend. And listen, much to the chagrin of probably everybody, before we're done, we're going to preview every single one of them, at least for a couple seconds.
Yeah, get your bowl pick'ems in. Everything kicks off Saturday, and as always, a ton of recruiting news to coming up to this early signing day period.
Yeah, boy, I tell you what, you really do see a lot of this starting to unfold around the SEC. Kind of a busy time, as Mike said. We'll deal with all of that. I'll remind you that AT&T is a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. And now, let me dive in with item number one on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. The, I think, big story in the SEC going in this weekend. Now, it's a huge day of official visits all throughout the SEC over the weekend. But the one taking place in Gainesville, Florida, between Matt Corral, the quarterback, who was a commit that was inherited by Dan Mullen when he took the Florida job. This visit this weekend, I think, may be the biggest of all the SEC's official visits for the weekend. I think this is a crucial moment for Mullen to sell his program to Corral and really get Corral in the fold here of the class of 2018. I think it's a tough situation if somehow it goes down the other way.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is Florida needs a quarterback. They need to sign a quarterback. It's not one of these situations like where you look at Georgia and you look at Alabama and possibly at a place like LSU and think, well, maybe we don't have to have this. Maybe we can move on with what we have at the depth chart. Florida needs a guy. I mean, when you talk about what's going on in their quarterback situation, what it has been for the last 5-10 years, they need to get somebody in there that Dan Mullen can at least be serviceable with. I mean, just somebody that can come close to running a Dan Mullen type offense. I think this is a completely big deal. Not only that, but on the flip side, when you talk about the other possibilities for a guy like Matt Corral, I couldn't see Florida losing a guy like that to a place like Ole Miss with everything that's going on at Ole Miss, but there's a lot of stuff going on both sides.
Well, let's see if we can sort of unfold and let you know a lot of the things that have gone on here. Let me start with a recent quote from Zach Alberverdi, our buddy who covers Florida recruiting for SECCountry.com, who kind of laid it out in really no uncertain terms of just how high the stakes are for the Gators this weekend. Talking about Corral, he says his trip to Florida this weekend could make or break his commitment. He has a bond with the Ole Miss coaches and fits what they do offensively. That must be established with Florida as well, making things tougher, Mike, for the opportunity for Mullen here in terms of selling Matt Corral is the fact that apparently the bond, as Zach alluded to, is growing with Ole Miss. Let me show you a tweet here from somebody who covers Ole Miss recruiting that kind of lays out just how much things have trended here. He says Ole Miss gathering momentum with Matt Corral's recruitment. Rebels are trying to flip his commitment from Florida to kickstart the early signing period. Corral would be a huge piece to build around with a few months left in the 2018 recruiting cycle. And what you see below there, guys like Steven Lorenz, Matej Seas, Daryl Hart, Chris Trevino, David Johnson. These are recruiting reporters who've gone to 247sports.com and they filled out those crystal ball predictions and they flipped their prediction for Corral to Ole Miss. These are guys who are kind of putting their money where their mouth is, thinking that Corral is going to go to the Rebels. A lot of this is based on the visit that Corral recently took to Ole Miss. We'll show you another picture here of Corral having a good time, wearing the Rebels uniform, and really just kind of showing that maybe Ole Miss could be a bit of a home for him there. And I think that if you're Florida, and I understand where you're coming from, Mike, that it's hard to imagine him not going to Florida, going to Ole Miss instead. But I think the challenge of the Rebels is one the Gators have to take seriously when they think about Corral this weekend.
Oh, 100% have to take it seriously, and it's big of a loss as this would be for Florida and Dan Mullen, in my opinion. I think on the flip side, this is huge for Matt Luke. When you talk about going out on the recruiting trail and starting to build something in that direction, when you starting to build towards some kind of positivity for your program, with the exit of Shea Patterson, with the exit of some of the other players you've had in and around the program, when you talk about the sanctions that have been handed down, Matt Corral, in my opinion, would start kind of a new era in terms of Matt Luke and the recruiting that's going on and trying to get this team pointed back in the right direction. Dan Mullen needs this guy, but it would be almost a bigger deal for a guy like Matt Luke to go on the recruiting trail and steal him from Florida and Dan Mullen.
Amazing how many people are saying some version of the same thing. Guys like Michael Cairns, Cliff Nelson saying that Matt Corral does not fit the Dan Mullen system. That comment's coming through a lot here in our comment section on our Facebook Live broadcast. But my point back to that is sometimes you don't get your hand-picked chosen one of your perfect quarterback. Sometimes you have to take the best available option. And I think there's very little doubt that Corral, of the remaining quarterbacks, is the best available option.
Yeah.
And by the way, Florida's lucky they're in business with a school like Corral. We'll talk later on about LSU, other places that are really desperately looking for a quarterback. So Corral may not be perfect for Dan Mullen's offense. I think he could work within it. He may not be perfect, but right now he's the best option they have.
Well, and exactly the best option they have. My question to any Florida fans that feel that way, maybe he doesn't fit in Dan Mullen's offense, is who does right now? I mean, who do you feel comfortable about when you start to kick things off with Dan Mullen and you get into the season? Who do you feel comfortable with being as your quarterback? I don't think it's anybody right now that's on your roster, and I think you have to try to move on with Matt Corral and say, hey, we'll make do with what we have for now until we can get on the recruiting trail the next couple of years and bring in somebody that does fit Dan Mullen's offense. I think you have to go with what the best you have, and right now that is Matt Corral.
R.J. Rain says, why would he go in when his first act was essentially trying to flip a quarterback, referencing the visit he took to Kennesaw, Georgia to visit Justin Fields? I'm going to tell you right now, I do think that was a dumb thing to do. Now, ultimately, would I put Florida as the point spread favorite to land Matt Corral? I guess I probably would.
Yeah.
But putting that in jeopardy for a Hail Mary pass against Justin Fields, who you are not getting. I mean, I know that some national analysts will tell you something different. I'm telling you right now, Florida's not getting Justin Fields. It was a waste of Dan Mullen's time, and he put Matt Corral at risk for doing it.
Yeah, and I think when you look at Matt Corral and the way he fits in the system, this is not a guy who's not athletic. I don't want to act like he's back there looking like a statue. I mean, this is somebody Dan Mullen can work with. I mean, it doesn't always have to be the athleticism. You don't always have to rush for 100 yards, but a guy who can pull the ball out of some of these option plays and get 5 and 6 yards up the field just to keep the defense honest, I think that's what Matt Corral gives you. If he has the arm talent, and a guy like Dan Mullen, who is an offensive type guru, can work with somebody in that sort of way, in that sort of realm athletically.
R.J. Drummond says, why would Corral go to Ole Miss? They can't even go to a bowl. Somebody else in the comment section, I apologize for not seeing the name, but somebody else asked you, would you have gone to Alabama if it were under sanctions when you went there? I mean, that's the weirdest part about this, is that Corral, who at one point in time was a 5-star quarterback, has now apparently settled on either Florida or a place like Ole Miss that really can't go to a bowl during his freshman season 2018. And by the way, for 2019, 2020, you're also talking about reduced scholarships that really impede his ability to win there.
Yeah, it is interesting that these are the two schools we're talking about. A school like Ole Miss that is under sanctions, and a school like Florida that maybe doesn't fit your style. Matt Corral has come down to this decision here at the end that you wonder if there's somebody else looming out there. Maybe he pushes back his announcement date. Maybe he tries to sign back in February. And the answer to that is you try to look beyond it. And in that tweet we just showed earlier, it talks about the relationships he has with the coaches and some of the players in Ole Miss. And a lot of times, that's a lot bigger deal. If you feel comfortable where you're going, if you're coming from out west and you feel comfortable about being in a place like Oxford, Mississippi, and you feel comfortable about the coaching staff, and sometimes moving away from home and being an 18-year-old kid, that's all you need to sign on the dotted line. So I think you have to weigh out your options. I think you have to see what's best for you out there. And listen, he's going to go to Florida this weekend on an official and see if those guys can start to develop that relationship.
A couple more quick comments on this. Rostamon Blair says, as an example of quarterbacks sometimes not being a perfect fit, look at Chris Leak, who in 2006 was a part of a national championship team for Florida, and Urban Meyer that definitely wanted a different quarterback. Now, obviously, Tim Tebow played some on that team, but a lot of that was Leak, who is not the kind of quarterback that Urban Meyer wanted to work with.
Right, and Urban Meyer was there in 05 with Chris Leak, didn't have a great season in their first season together, and it didn't really fit Urban Meyer. So you end up recruiting Tim Tebow, and you wonder if maybe he'll take over the system. They ended up playing kind of both of them and kind of getting what you wanted to, and obviously that ended in a national title.
One more quick comment on this. Matthew Holder says, so we're ditching Felipe Franks, only a sophomore? Here's the thing, and I don't mean this in any way to be disrespectful to Felipe Franks. If he was obviously the quarterback for Florida, we'd all know. It'd be obvious from watching his games. Yeah. But he was benched for Luke Del Rio. It was not a strong quarterback really at the end of the season, and whether Matt Corral wins the job at Florida as a freshman or they do give the ball back to Felipe Franks, you need the other option there. What you don't want, this is the kind of thing that could, I don't want to be over dramatic here, but you can end a coaching career before it starts. If you go into the season with limited options at quarterback, you can just get pummeled in games if you don't have the extra body to go to. That's what Corral represents, whether he starts or not, is that extra body potentially at the quarterback position.
Yeah, and if we're talking about the fact that maybe Matt Corral doesn't fit as a Dan Mullen style quarterback, then it's definitely not Felipe Franks. And I think Felipe Franks has all the arm talent in the world. He's got all the measurables you want as a pocket passer. And I think possibly out there still is a home for Felipe Franks somewhere on the college radar. I think that he goes in the season, tries to find the starting job under Dan Mullen. If he gets that done, good. Then maybe Dan Mullen has found a role for this guy, and maybe you can find some Chris Leak, Tim Tebow type comparisons. But I got to be honest, Felipe Franks, to me, athletically, when you're talking about just keeping defenses honest with his legs, he doesn't bring that to the table to me, not even close to what Matt Corral would. So a lot of upside with your arm with your Felipe Franks, but the downside with the legs, to me, does not fit Dan Mullen at all.
By the way, Dice K in the comment section said, has my Georgia G gotten even bigger since the last time I wore it? Is it really that big?
Pretty big G. I think it's
is it oversized? Is it oversized?
It's the same size as the logo on the helmet, if that tells you anything. I don't know. I don't know. It's
so is it over? I don't even think of it as being oversized. This is just a comfortable sweatshirt.
Yeah, I'm sure.
You realize in Georgia it's been cold lately.
He's still riding that college football playoff wave. He's just.
Listen, I'm happy. Hey, some of y'all been in the college football playoff a million times. Us over at Georgia, we haven't done that. So yeah, let me tell you something. It's going to take me a while to kind of come down off that high.
It's not a act like you've been there scenario.
No, we haven't been there. What do you want from me on that? All right, let me move on to number 2 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So we talked yesterday about Adrian Martinez, the 4-star quarterback. Some in-home visits going on with Tennessee, and now, as we kind of suggest was a possibility yesterday, Martinez has flipped from Tennessee and has committed to Nebraska. We'll show you the official word coming down here from Adrian Martinez on Twitter. He is now committed. He becomes the first big Scott Frost commit there at Nebraska with the hashtag Frost era and the snowflake emoji. I guess that's what we're going with there in Lincoln. I would imagine this is probably a pretty big pickup for Nebraska fans. Do you have an opinion? And listen, I'm not going to ask you to evaluate Martinez's game. It's hard to know how a high school kid's going to translate to college. But in terms of losing your centerpiece quarterback, how big of a loss is this for Jeremy Pruitt, you think?
I think it's a big deal, and I think it becomes a bigger deal when you double down with the fact that Michael Penix, the quarterback out of Tampa that was also committed, that they basically asked him to, to not come on as official this week.
And by the way, I don't mean to cut you off, but Mike Griffith goes down there and does an interview with him. And I was going to play some of the audio. I had a little bit of a technical issue. But he flat out just said, hey, they told me, I got to find a new home. He laid it on the line.
And I wonder if and obviously Adrian Martinez is a little bit of a step up in quarterbacks, but I do wonder if maybe he just wasn't being shown as much love from the Jeremy Pruitt era of coaches. Maybe he's got some guys in there and said, you know what, I'm just not getting as many phone calls from this new regime of coaches, and maybe that's why he decided that, he was better fitted elsewhere, like a place like Nebraska. I don't know what Jeremy Pruitt's tactics are right now as far as quarterbacks go. I think that he goes in next year and feels okay with what's on the roster, but obviously you've seen a ton of decommits. You've seen him throw out a ton of offers to underclassmen, 9th graders, 10th graders, and right now it seems like he has a plan. I don't know if everybody understands what the plan is, but maybe he's looking elsewhere as far as quarterbacks go. I think this is a hit. I think from the outside looking in, you look at a guy like Adrian Martinez, no matter what system you're playing, it's probably a hit for Tennessee. But I don't think it's the end of days for Tennessee right now, Jeremy Pruitt.
Bo Molinari says, wouldn't you rather play for Frost in Nebraska than go to the Tennessee dumpster fire? Under Jeremy Pruitt, I don't know that it's going to be a dumpster fire. Was it a dumpster fire at the end of the Butch Jones era? For sure. Was the coaching search totally botched? It was. But landing on Jeremy Pruitt, I think that Pruitt's got a chance to bring in some talent there. So if you give me the choice of the uncertainty of Tennessee versus what I think Nebraska's going to be, better weather, I think that Jeremy Pruitt's just as hot of a coaching prospect, at least in my mind. It's certainly based on the fit with the SEC. I don't know that it's a no-brainer that you choose Nebraska right there, and I don't know that it's completely true that Martinez won't eventually regret his decision.
Well, I think it's almost the same topic we were just talking about. When you talk about Florida and Ole Miss right now, there's a lot of problems at Ole Miss, and there's a lot of problems with the bowl ban, a lot of problems with the scholarship sanctions, but you still look at the scenarios where you develop a relationship. And you have a guy like Dan Mullen and Scott Frost that are good quarterback, offensive-driven head coaches, and maybe you can land at a place like them at new schools. It's kind of the same way of measuring things up. Tennessee obviously doesn't have the sanctions, but a lot of people are going to call that a dumpster fire from the outside looking in. I think it's about relationships. Jeremy Pruitt has proven the fact that he can recruit, and maybe he sees something out there that's the direction they'd rather move.
Murphy 10 in the comment section says Tennessee is going to be set back for many years to come. What he says is Vols are in trouble for years to come. That may be true. I think the point that I'd make here is, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I believe this, full-heartedly. When you're a defensive-minded head coach, who you outsource your offense to is really, really important. It's pretty easy for a good offensive head coach to find some defensive staff members. A lot of those guys don't become head coaches. But when you're the defensive-minded guy, who you hire to run your offense really matters. And who you put your faith and trust in as a quarterback really matters. And who, as a quarterback, you convince to put their trust in you truly matters. If Pruitt, look what happened to Muschamp at Florida. Muschamp had everything but the quarterback, and I guess the OC too, but he had everything but that offense squared away. Top 5 classes every single year. Muschamp, who looks like a fairly competent coach here at South Carolina, but a disaster there because he couldn't find the quarterback. That's got to be a thought in the back of Tennessee and Jeremy Pruitt's mind of this thing is not proven to be a success, and he's not proven to be a coach that can stick until he finds that quarterback.
Well, now, I think the tactic that Jeremy Pruitt is employing right now is, and you've seen the news start to come out where he's down, Kevin Sherr's down in the Mobile area, and they've offered 6 freshmen and sophomores from the state of Alabama, and they're starting to go down into Florida, and you see them kind of making good graces with the relationships in Tennessee. I think he understands that this is not a one-year rebuilding job. He understands that, listen, I've got a quarterback on campus I feel like is pretty good, so we're not going to go out of our way to try to sign somebody that's along the same lines. And developing those relationships and moving on maybe past 2018 for me is going to be a big deal for Jeremy Pruitt. You can't keep trying to recycle the same ways that things have been going on at Tennessee. He's trying to do things differently, and I kind of commend him for that because it's been a while since Tennessee's been pretty good.
Mike and Michelle Tankersley in the comment section says, we're looking for pro-style quarterbacks at Tennessee now. Once again, that may be true, but I don't believe that Pruitt just washes his hands and says, Adrian Martinez is gone, good riddance. I don't believe that's true. Even if he wasn't the perfect quarterback for Tennessee, Pruitt's from the same line of coaches that Nick Saban, Kirby Smart. These guys want competition in every position. And right now for Tennessee, there's not enough competition at quarterback.
I agree. And here's the thing. Here's the way I feel about how Jeremy Pruitt's going to approach this weekend. I think the more people he can get to push their signing day back and say, well, you know what, I was going to sign on December 20th. Maybe I'll push that back a little bit and I'll sign in that second period because I want to take a harder look at Tennessee. I think that's what Jeremy Pruitt's going for right now. It's not, hey, let's see how many guys we can get on campus and flip. And that would be great. If you can flip a couple guys this weekend and have a good early strong signing class, big deal for Jeremy Pruitt. But I think if you can get some of those guys to just say, let me just take a minute, let me push some things back, then I think this weekend becomes a big win for Jeremy Pruitt.
Raymond Cox says the Tennessee quarterback search is starting to look a lot like their coaching search. A lot of names out there, but does anyone really want the job? And he's obviously laughing about that as a Georgia fan. But to a degree, there is some truth in that in terms of SEC teams that need quarterbacks and quarterbacks that are kind of available, there are more spots than quarterbacks. For instance, Emory Jones looks like he may stick with Ohio State. At least there's a chance that he does. If that's the case, that means that James Foster, a quarterback who was a one-time Missouri commit, decommits from there and has been kind of linked to a few different schools. Maybe Alabama all of a sudden turns to James Foster at this point in time, which takes another quarterback off the market. And a lot of these quarterbacks who've been tied to the SEC schools, they're just all kind of getting, dried up here, and they're not going to end up, you're kind of getting what you want here.
Yeah, James Foster from Montgomery. I think he was also committed to UNC at one point early on in his recruiting process, and then to Mizzou, and now it's like he's got the big schools coming after him. I mean, it's Alabama, like Florida State, LSU. He's going to see all these schools start to try to recruit him on down the stretch, and I understand what it is when these schools look at these guys and say, well, we need to sign a quarterback this time around. But how many times, and I've mentioned this at times on the show, how many times recently have we seen these schools that have been good with transfer quarterbacks? That these transfer quarterbacks come into places like LSU and come into places like Auburn and can be good. So I just don't put it in the category anymore of we have to sign a quarterback or it's really bad, because I think in a lot of ways things start to even out over the course of the season, and a lot of these guys will end up at different places.
Keith Christensen says Kentucky needs a quarterback too. I believe Jaron Williams, who was the Kentucky quarterback commit, I think he committed to Miami. Is that right? Williams ended up flipping from Kentucky to Miami, so that was another loss for the SEC, one of those guys that sort of snuck out of the league. Let me keep this theme going with item number 3 here on AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10, because if the situation seems somewhat problematic at Tennessee, it may be flat out dire when it comes to quarterbacks at LSU. And one of the guys that's noticed that is our host for the SEC Country LSU podcast, Carter Bryant, who, upon realizing that it right now looks like LSU is probably not going to sign a quarterback for the class of 2018. Made a big push for Justin Ross, but Ross, who's an elite prospect, is probably going to end up going to TCU. After making that big push, it looks like LSU is going to swing and miss and not sign any quarterbacks for this cycle. Carter Bryant's not happy. Here's what he said.
It's looking as if LSU will not get a quarterback commit in this class. And that's frustrating, considering that LSU has had their fair share of quarterbacking issues. Now, of course, Miles Brennan and Lowell Narcisse, obviously Miles playing as a true freshman last year and Lowell Narcisse redshirting, there's still a lot to be seen with those two guys. Can they actually play? And, it's just more and more frustration. And I love Danny Etling, I do. But that's not the level of quarterbacking play that you would expect at LSU.
And just to quickly correct myself, Tyler Mann pointed this out in the comment section. It's Justin Rogers.
Yeah,
That's the quarterback that may end up going to TCU that LSU tried to go after. But when you listen to what Carter Bryant says there, who I think in those words probably reflects a lot of the feelings of LSU fans, that with Etling gone, and he was never really much more than a game manager anyway, and you think about Miles Brennan, who played, I guess, okay at times, Lowell Narcisse, that never really challenged Brennan in terms of leapfrogging him on the depth chart. That's not enough quarterbacks for LSU, almost for sure, right?
Yeah, it's not at all, and I think it does become a little bit of a struggle. And like I mentioned, I think if you are Ed Orgeron, you start looking around some of the transfers that you're going to see from some of these places that have either played up above their ability and are transferring and want to get to a bigger school, or the other way around, somebody that's dropping off. I mean, maybe you look at a guy like Jacob Eason or Felipe Franks or some of these other quarterbacks in and around the SEC that you could start seeing as transfers. I think that's the only other option you have for Ed Orgeron. And I understand it. Listen, we're not going to stretch. We're not going to try to get a quarterback that, if we don't feel like this guy fits our system, then we're not just going to sign somebody to sign somebody. But I think you're treading on really thin ice right now if you're Ed Orgeron, and keeping that depth chart to where it's at LSU.
And Jake Higginbotham also pointing out that same thing, that maybe they are pushing for a transfer quarterback. But here's the question that I would ask, and this is not me trying to stir the pot and cause trouble. I would honestly wonder this. I mean, Matt Canada is being paid $1.5 million, or somewhere in that neighborhood. Why wasn't LSU more in the Justin Fields sweepstakes? Fields takes an official visit, but it doesn't really seem like LSU ever had a lot of traction there. Why is it Ole Miss who's in the mix for Matt Corral, but not LSU? Why is it that some of these elite quarterbacks from around the country aren't thinking about LSU as a place to go? I mean, it's great that Matt Canada is a good play caller. I think that he probably is. There was evidence to point to that here in 2017. But I'm paying that guy to find my quarterback of the future. I don't mind taking a transfer, but for a place like LSU, don't you want to build the kind of depth that you can only build through recruiting?
Yeah.
That would be a concern for me if I was an LSU fan.
And I think it is interesting, too, to point out that Justin Rogers is looking at a place like TCU, where 10 years ago, this isn't a topic. I mean, TCU wasn't in the Big 12. They're not known as like a household name. And then all of a sudden, they're jumping on quarterback prospects over LSU. That'd have been in my day playing college football, that would be huge news for a place like TCU. And LSU's battling a little bit of that. I think you're going to see, some of these other teams start to go in on the James Foster sweepstakes, like Alabama, like a Texas A&M, like a Florida State, trying to get that guy. I just don't know that the opportunity sits out there for LSU to sign one of these marquee guys. So if it is a transfer, I'm perfectly okay with it. To get somebody in there, you feel like you can run Matt Canada's system. I just think it's, and I know this is what you're about to say, it's just really, really thin ice right now when you look at that depth chart and look at what is ahead for this program.
I agree. I mean, if Brennan or Narcisse were going to be a superstar quarterback, I'm going to say the same thing about them I would have said about Felipe Franks. We would have known it. We saw Brennan play a pretty good bit.
Right.
He's fine, but he's not. He does not seem to have superstar printed on his back here. He may be okay, but not a superstar. If you bring in the transfer, you create more competition and you add a little bit more depth. But it feels like a stopgap measure for Ed Orgeron, who would like to stick around Baton Rouge for a while here. This is not the 1 year wonder sort of holdover to get to somebody else. You gotta build your future, and to me, that's done through recruiting more so than a transfer.
Yeah, and I'm going to disagree a little bit. I don't know if we saw enough of Miles Brennan to say he's not the guy. And I think that we get so caught up in what was going on in the field and the fact that Danny Etling played and that they were able to rattle off a couple games, and Miles Brennan didn't look electric. But I don't know. I think quarterbacks, in terms of that position, they take a different mindset when they are the man. You can walk into the huddle, take control. Hey, I didn't just show up on campus a month ago. This is my team. I'm going through spring practice. I know the timing. Keep in mind, this was not an early enrollee in Miles Brennan. This guy showed up, later on in the summer, and he had to get up under that offense and learn some things. So considering that, I think he did an okay job. I mean, we start measuring these other quarterbacks, and you can look at Tua, you can look at Jake Fromm, you look at some of the other freshmen. Yeah, there's still some up in the air about what exactly they are if they're game-changing quarterbacks. I mean, I don't know what we're going to have on the field next year for Georgia if it's Jake Fromm against Justin Fields for the next couple of years. We don't know if we're going to see one of those guys be really the man either. So I think I'd love to see more of Miles Brennan. I think he will be the guy when they kick off this year. I'm not ready to quite throw him away as being the guy just yet.
Jake Higginbotham says LSU prioritizes defensive backs and running backs, receivers, all over quarterbacks they always have. It's that last part of that phrase, though, that would give me a little bit of pause. I thought the whole point of the transition from Les Miles to Ed Orgeron and the hiring of a guy like Matt Canada was to get away from what LSU had always been. And don't get me wrong, LSU's been an elite recruiting program, and those great defensive backs and really good wide receivers and terrific running backs is a big reason why LSU's won what it's won. I get that. But it's LSU fans themselves who've been telling us they wanted a new-look LSU offense. Mike, I'm going to tell you, you don't fully get that new-look offense unless you have your true franchise quarterback. I know that's normally an NFL phrase, but you got to have that franchise quarterback guy. At least you got to have a candidate for that on the roster.
Well, and I think you look at it from different angles too. And I'm going to go back to Georgia for a little bit too. I think that if Ed Orgeron could design an offense around Miles Brennan, it would look a lot like what's going on at Georgia right now, or possibly at Alabama, where hey, we have this running game, we have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, we have another group of 3 running backs they're probably going to sign this year in their signing class, and hey, we can put together this ground game with a strong offensive line and put a guy like Miles Brennan in the backfield that hey, we're not going to ask to do a ton. And so I don't know if you have this guy that you can throw the ball 70 yards downfield and runs a 4.4. To me, that doesn't always spell success at places like LSU. So I think you can keep the things tempered about Miles Brennan and just hope for the best for him.
All right, let me do item number 4 here. Before I do that, I do this every single day. I'd leap right over my opportunity to pay the bills here. Let me remind you that AT&T is a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless DirecTV. They'll help you stay connected all season long. And item number 4, speaking of Georgia, college football playoff gets going for the Dogs on January 1st in the Rose Bowl against Oklahoma. And maybe Georgia has some help from a linebacker that it didn't think it was going to have on the field. You may remember that right after the SEC championship game, that night, in fact, 2 Georgia players, Jason Stanley and Natrez Patrick, were arrested in the car, and marijuana was at the center of this discussion. For Patrick, he's had a couple run-ins with this in the past. This would have potentially been strike 3 and out of the Georgia program, at least based on university policy. But hold everything here. Charges against Patrick dropped today. Let me show you what Mark Schlabach tweeted about this in contact with the officials there in Barrow County, which is a county near Clark County where Athens, Georgia is located. He says the district attorney's office in Winder, Georgia, that is Barrow County, dismissed misdemeanor marijuana charges against Georgia linebacker Natrez Patrick, who's one of 2 Georgia players arrested during a traffic stop on December 3rd. As we said, Jason Stanley was the other guy. But here's where things also kind of get interesting, because Schlabach tweeted some evidence that was used against Patrick, and I want you to see how small, how minute an amount of marijuana this is. That's an official sanctioned penny right there in the center of your screen.
This might be an SEC Country Live first.
Yeah, exactly. Above that, just to the left, and above that to the top, are the fragments of marijuana, all collected together, smaller than that penny. That's what Natrez Patrick got arrested for. Now, Mike, I don't really care one way or another if you think pot should be legal or not.
Right.
That's probably a different topic for a different show. But we're gonna throw a guy in jail for what looks to be, I mean, I don't even know. I mean, that's like, that's smaller than your fingernail.
Yeah, I mean, the question I have is, first of all, were these guys drunk? Had they been smoking that night? Were they behind the wheel? And I think there's a little bit of an Ezekiel Elliott type approach to this where, what did these guys tell the cops, and what did they tell Kirby Smart about this entire run-in? Did they look at it and say, well, we didn't know? Or did they just, because in the video when you watch it, there's no like, hey, that was just a small amount. I don't know where that came from. It's just a little flake on the seat. It was like, oh my God, I'm sorry that we are in this situation. Please don't ruin our lives. And I understand what you're saying, and I'm on board with you. Trust me. I'm completely on board with the fact that it's a tiny little amount and it's a speck on the seat. But just because we had this handed down in a court of law that the charges were dropped, I want to know what they told Kirby Smart. I want to know what they got in front of their coach and said, listen, this is what happened. I want to know if they said, hey, it was a tiny speck, we weren't smoking, or if this is just something that's played out in the court and the court can't uphold it, but still these guys were in the wrong.
Greg Seal says they smoked up all the evidence. Greg, also a Florida fan. Of course, I guess I have my Georgia G on the sweatshirt, too, so maybe we both come at this from a different perspective.
I don't know. I wouldn't dismiss that. There's probably a strong chance that might be
Michael
true.
Clyburn says the law is the law. They should get in trouble no matter what the amount. But there's a degree to which that's somewhat hypocritical, because the law also says 55 miles an hour, and I know that none of you on that comment section are driving 55 miles an hour.
Well,
every single one of you are skating some law somewhere, and
right.
You better believe if you get pulled over for going 60 to 55, you're looking back at the police and you're not saying, hey, the law is the law, you got me. I mean, so there's a degree to which we're all sort of hypocrites when it comes to stuff like that.
Oh, we definitely are. Listen, I dealt with the same comment section thing for defending Deshaun Hand back when he was taking a nap in his car. He got the DUI in Tuscaloosa during training camp or right before training camp. And to the degree, I think that's true with all this stuff. When we look at these kids, they're in college, they're doing dumb stuff, and then we have a tendency to turn on the TV on Saturday and be like, well, these are grown men playing a grown man's game. It's not true. These kids are 18, 19, and 20. They're going to mess up. But the degree to which they mess up and whether they're being honest with what's going on in the situation, I think tells the tale.
Greg Virtue says, please, it wasn't even a roach. What is a roach?
I don't know.
How much is how much is a roach? Is that like a blunt, like a joint?
Like a little guy.
At the very end of it.
We're having a bunch of new stuff here on SEC Country. I don't know if we've ever
I'd give anything if I had like the street cred to like pull that off. But I'd been like, guys, come on, that's not even a roach.
Yeah, I know. Listen, you're pointing at the wrong guy. You're pointing at the wrong guy for sure.
So anyway, I mean, I guess there's a chance that Patrick goes from being potentially kicked off the team to now. There's still some hurdles that have to be cleared here, and Kirby Smart hasn't said anything yet on the matter, at least as of the time we're coming on the air here. But there's a chance that Patrick could be playing this football game.
Well, and see, that's what I want to know. That's really my big question when it comes to all this is. Kirby Smart called these guys right after this happened. Is this something where the lawyer got in there and said, "Oh, we can get this dropped just a tiny amount," and these guys just blabbed everything to Kirby Smart? Did they go to Kirby Smart's office and say, "We're guilty. We did this. We had marijuana. We had been smoking. We had been drinking. It was a bad situation. We messed up"? Or did they go in there and say, "Coach, we don't know where it came from. It was just a flake on the seat"? And I think that Kirby Smart has been almost smart about this. No pun intended. To kind of keep comments, away from everything. To wait till things played out in this court of public opinion and the court of law, and to wait till it dies down because. Now Kirby Smart has the ability to go out there and say, well, the charges were dropped. I mean, we can stick this guy in the game. So I'd love to know. I'd love to have been a fly on the wall and heard what he heard.
Couple things here. Chris Smith asked me what hole I grew up in. Here's the thing. You got to understand something. I'm like the biggest square in the world. Okay, so like whatever cool stuff y'all were doing when you're growing up, or for those of you who are young, you may be doing right now. I can promise you, I wasn't doing any of that kind of stuff. I was. Continue to be the biggest square in the world. You can take one look at me and tell that.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, you're asking me what it is. I've spent, before I was done playing football 2-3 years ago, I'd spent the last 10, 12 years getting drug tested every other month. So I'm definitely not the guy to ask on situations.
And William Fisher in the comments section says, y'all are such Georgia homers. If this was Florida, you'd be all over them. Here's the thing. I'm a Georgia homer. Mike grew up in Pensacola. He may have gone to Alabama, right, but he grew up in Pensacola. He's not anywhere near the Florida hater I am.
Well, and the thing is, too, I feel like I've tried to take the same stance no matter who it has been getting in trouble, because we've talked about Alabama players arrested, we've talked about Tennessee players being arrested, we've talked about Florida players arrested. Yeah. And before the entire Florida 10 people being suspended thing, I was on like Antonio Callaway's side and saying, listen, you can't mess up anymore, but some of these other players, it's not a cultural issue to me. We're not going to bury some of these guys for some of these mess ups just because their teammate messed up. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like you have to approach each kind of incident individually. So I'm not going to bury any of these guys, and I feel like we've probably approached it from the same manner no matter what it's been, other than the 10 players being suspended for the entire season at Florida. That's a little bit bigger deal.
By the way, speaking of Antonio Callaway, Kevin Carver says that all that weed, maybe Antonio Callaway bought it for him on his credit card. See, it all comes full circle eventually.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
Item number 5 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So ESPN did a pretty cool thing. They had like a really fancy, a lot of moving graphics, a lot of sleek presentation, the college football preview. Did you get a chance to read any of this? This is like a really cool thing. And one of the things they did in the Alabama-Clemson preview was get a quote from an anonymous coach about how Alabama lines up with Clemson. And kind of a blunt statement here from the coach. We don't know who it is, but he says Alabama doesn't have that difference-maker pass rusher rushing the passer as it did in the past. Without a Jonathan Allen or Tim Williams getting after the quarterback, the defense has been put in a bind. Do you expose your secondary by giving the quarterback too much time, or do you expose them further by rushing a safety or quarterback? It's a win-win for the offense no matter what. This is an Alabama team that's in the playoff, has a shot to win the national championship. But are they missing the kind of pass rusher that makes that possible?
Well, I think they have all year. When you talk about, the linebackers that got hurt there in week 1, I mean, two of those guys, Terrell Lewis and Christian Miller, premier pass rushers, guys you planned on leaning on throughout the entire season. Both of them probably needed a little bit of development. Never got the chance to do it because they set out from halfway against Florida State to basically playing only a handful of snaps against Auburn. So you just haven't seen them really on the field. And I understand where that comes from. And I really don't know what Alabama's going to get from Christian Miller and Terrell Lewis when you start to get in this game. I think that they'll be able to provide quality snaps, giving an extra month or giving an extra 5 weeks of trying to get healthy after the Iron Bowl. So I don't know. I'm not ready to say they don't have a premier pass rusher, because maybe they do. Maybe one of these guys gets healthy, maybe becomes a force in one of these games. I think that's what you have to look out for. But I have to agree with the point that Nick Saban is trying to find ways this entire year, and Jeremy Pruitt's been the same way, of just trying to mix things up. You don't go just one way. And I think that the way this situation gets presented is, are we going to drop back and trust that we can cover all these guys, or are we going to try to blitz and see if we get beat? You don't do just one or the other. You mix it up. You mix in some blitzes, see if the quarterback can catch you kind of off guard and maybe complete some passes. There's not one answer. Hopefully these guys come back and give them some more production, though.
Joshua Finch says still top 3 defense, and that's probably true. I mean, this is among the best teams in the country. But it does sort of present a kind of an interesting contrast in which Alabama makes the playoff largely, and I think you and I both believe this, because when you look at the rest of college football, they're the team you least want to play. Alabama's scarier than almost anybody else in the sport. Even if they didn't win the SEC, this is still kind of a scary team to play. But I do have to admit, they seem a lot less scary than other Alabama teams. And that could just be wishful thinking. Wishful thinking for a guy like me whose favorite team is in the playoff, or just sort of wishful thinking from a media perspective that's just sort of hungry for a new storyline, where Alabama's not necessarily the most dominant team anymore. We like the idea of things changing. But you can't help but I can't certainly deny that Alabama, this version, the 2017 version, does not seem as dominant as the 2016, 2015, 2014, all three of which were in the college football playoff.
Yeah, I think that's fair to point out. And obviously the injuries have been a big thing, but I think that when you look at Alabama's statistics, and we're going to sit there and talk about them being top 5, they're top 5 total defense, top 5 scoring defense, number 1 in some of these defensive categories. What they haven't been good at is these teams converting on third down. And I think that's where it becomes scary if you're an Alabama fan, and it makes you feel good if you're a Clemson fan or somebody else they're going to face is, hey, we can get some of these third down percentages to go up in our favor. And I think that's up to this pass rush for Alabama to try to get that done in the opposite direction.
Robert Patrick says, and I completely agree with this, that Kelly Bryant's not Deshaun Watson. They're going to stop Bryant from running and take their chances that he beats them with his arm. And for me, that's as simple as it comes. Close game last year. Clemson won on the back of one of the all-time great quarterbacks, certainly in recent college football history. He's not playing this year. Therefore, I believe that Alabama probably wins. And I don't know that I have to go much more in depth with my analysis. It was a close win with Watson. He's not there. That's probably not a Clemson team that wins without him.
Well, I think that's fair. But I think we're also dealing with a different offense on Alabama's side of the ball. I think you have to wonder the game plan that Brian Dable is going to put out. Is he going to hand the ball to these running backs? Because last year they were doing that. They were handing it to Bo, and then all of a sudden Bo gets dinged up and you don't hand the ball off anymore. And that kind of causes Alabama's offense to stumble. And I hate doing this thing where it's Peyton Manning against Tom Brady. It's quarterback against quarterback, because that's never how it plays out. Mm-hmm. I really do feel like this is a game where it's quarterback against quarterback. What can Kelly Bryant do against Alabama's defense, and what can Jalen Hurts do against this front seven from Clemson that you might have 3 first-round draft picks on the defensive line? So what can he do? What can Kelly Bryant do? Who can convert more of these third downs? I really do feel like the game almost comes down to just that.
Jordan White says Saban's getting a month instead of a week to prepare. That's true, but we had a topic earlier this week. We played some of the audio from guys like Tim Tebow and Marcus Spears. Everybody acts like it's no big deal that Jeremy Pruitt's working part-time as Tennessee head coach right now. But a lot of that month to prepare, that's delegated work for your assistants. Listen, Pruitt's not doing that stuff. Pruitt is no different than anybody else. At work, we say that we're doing this, but secretly we're at our computer watching AT&T SEC Country Live. Pruitt may say that he's game plan stuff like that. You better believe every waking minute that he can, he's sneaking off and doing something for Tennessee, even if he's continuing to draw that Alabama paycheck. That's just human nature.
Yeah, I think it's fair to point that out too, and I think a lot of Alabama fans share that. I think that a lot of people are concerned about that. What is Jeremy Pruitt going to do? Is he going to be able to put enough time in? The way I've kind of considered it for myself is Jeremy Pruitt was going to spend time recruiting anyways. He was going to be, as a defense coordinator, he was going to go on the road. He's going to host official visitors. He's going to be watching film. So I guess in my own head, I'm looking at it saying he's just switched teams. He's not game planning right now for Tennessee, so he still has the time to game plan and beating meetings with his players. He's just recruiting for a different team, and maybe that helps me kind of weigh it out in my own head.
Quick final comment on this subject. Christopher P. Shooter Smith says Minkah Fitzpatrick's going to cover up Renfro. And I know that Hunter Renfro has hurt Alabama here in the last couple of matchups, but Minkah Fitzpatrick is too valuable of a defensive player to put a blanket on Renfro in this game, or am I wrong? You got to have Minkah Fitzpatrick doing a little bit of everything. I know that Renfro's hurt you before, but this is not Jerry Rice here we're talking about. Minkah Fitzpatrick's too valuable to be, paying attention to Renfro all game long.
It's going to be interesting to see what they do in the secondary, because you're missing a guy like Hootie Jones, who is out now for the rest of the year, and you're having to put in a guy in Deontay Thompson that's a freshman, and a lot of people say he has a high upside, but hasn't played a ton. So now you're looking at using 6 defensive backs. All these guys have had a lot of playing time, but how do you use Minkah Fitzpatrick? I don't think there's a clear answer. I think you do different packages with different things depending on what they come out. Maybe he's at safety, maybe he's at nickel, maybe he's at corner. I just think you have to prepare all these guys for the different scenarios.
Josh Brooks says Bama wins by at least 10 against Clemson. I could see that happening. I think it's a matchup with Georgia or a matchup with Oklahoma where Alabama could potentially be in trouble because of some of the issues I brought up in the past, including the fact that I think that Jalen Hurts is incredibly limited. But I think Alabama's good enough to beat Clemson. There's a chance that it is 10 points or so, the kind of thing where Bama fans are not sweating it out too much.
And I could definitely see that possibility. I don't look at it as much as like Deshaun Watson's gone. I look at it as, and it shows you my background. I look at it as Alabama's offensive line against Clemson's defensive line. I don't know that Alabama's offensive front is as good as it has been the last couple of years. And so that leaves a couple of head scratchers for me. When you look at how much talent is up front on Clemson's defensive line, I think their defensive line alone could keep this one close.
All right, let me ask you a quick question before we move on here. Mike, Robert Simpson in the comment section says, Mike, you are so freaking awesome. And he gives like 6 exclamation marks. Is this just my low self-esteem, or does this sort of feel like he's saying, Mike, you're so awesome compared to the idiot you're sitting next to? Because he doesn't say, hey, I love this show. He says, you in particular are awesome.
I don't know.
It sort of feels like he's saying, I don't know how you put up with that idiot that you sit next to.
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's not today. Maybe it was awesome for something before. I don't know. Maybe I put out a good tweet today or something. Maybe he's just, I don't know.
Sort of
maybe
feels like
2 thumbs up. I
appreciate
appreciate that,
like
though.
hey,
you know what? You're awesome, too, man.
Sort of feels like a shot at me, but listen, no matter why you watch the show, just glad you watch, even if it is just for Mike. Let me move on here to item number 6 in our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So Gus Malzahn, the Auburn Tigers, getting ready to get after it with some bowl practices. By the way, it is about time some of these teams started practicing. It feels like we played games 7 years ago.
Yeah, Bama's still not. Bama doesn't practice till tomorrow. I mean, they haven't been on the practice field at all.
I don't even think Georgia's announced when it's practicing.
Yeah.
I think its first practice is going to be Saturday.
Probably so.
This is like the most interminable wait for football. The point is, slowly but surely, these teams are getting back on the practice field again, including Auburn. Had a bit of a Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl press conference with the folks from UCF, and Malzahn was facing a bunch of questions. One of the questions he was asked is about all your assistants coming back. He did confirm that is going to happen. And then he said something again that he said before about how optimistic he is about what the future looks like for Auburn. If you're an Auburn fan, take a listen to this, and I'm curious if you agree. Here's Malzahn.
Talk about the future and how bright the future is, and everything kind of coming together right now with the foundation that we have with our talent. We have depth. We're recruiting extremely well again, and I said this before the year that the next 3 or 4 years I feel like are going to be our best years, at least since I've been at Auburn, and I believe that more today than I even did, the first year. So I feel very good about where we're at moving forward.
It's really interesting. It's almost the exact same phrase he's used before. The next 3 to 4 years is going to be the best they've had since he's been at Auburn. I don't quite know what his reason for that is, other than maybe just the general enthusiasm that comes from sticking around after he had a chance to leave. But I mean, how much stock are you putting into what Malzahn says there? Do you believe him when he says the next 3 to 4 years could be the best yet?
I want to believe him, and listen, Gus Malzahn's stock, and we've been talking about this for a year now. Gus Malzahn's stock in my book has risen tenfold. I mean, the way he dealt with those home games against Georgia and Alabama to end the season, the way he's been able to kind of turn this program around after a couple of tough losses this year when you talk about LSU and Clemson, and get these guys playing at a high level. Now, I think they have the ability on this team. When you look at what they're doing defensively, if Kevin Steele sticks around, if Chip Lindsey sticks around, and some of their players come back next year, I think they'll be an incredible football team.
Yeah.
And I think for years to come, they'll be an incredible football team. My only worry is that sometimes I look at Gus Malzahn's teams, and it's kind of a one guy. You've seen it before with Trey Mason. It's Kerryon Johnson this year. What are you without those one guys? Do you have the ups and downs at Auburn without those one guys? Or has this become a system under Gus Malzahn where, hey, I can plug in the next crop of guys and I get the same production? I don't know that Gus Malzahn has that in his bag, but I got to be honest with you. I believe him now more than ever as a head coach at Auburn.
But Trey Duke says kind of the same thing, except he brings up the quarterback, Jarrett Stidham, who I guess, if you take the 24/7 Sports Report at its word, Stidham's thinking more about coming back than he is going in the NFL. That's also that sort of one-guy phenomenon for me, and that's who Trey Dukes mentions. Another year in the system, Stidham could be really dangerous in the SEC. But Malzahn's not talking about next year with Jarrett Stidham. He's talking about the next 3 to 4 years. And I guess there's a part of me that wants to say, well, what do you have for me after Stidham's gone?
Yeah.
What's your plan beyond that? Because, I mean, Alabama's not getting any less talented, and Georgia, your other bitter rival, is getting more talented. I mean, what makes things tough for Malzahn is he was losing to Georgia back when Georgia was average. Georgia's in the college football playoff now. How much more difficult does that rivalry get now that Kirby Smart seems to really have things cooking there?
Well, but let's give Gus Malzahn credit, too. This is Georgia's best team in a long time, and he's able to beat them. And he's beat 2 teams in the college football playoff this year, and that's why I tend to give him the benefit of the doubt when he says stuff like this. He has a handle on his program. I think the biggest question I have, and I kind of just touched on it, but the biggest question I have for Gus Malzahn is this: when are you going to give a franchise quarterback to sign with you on signing day out of high school? That's the question I have.
Really
How
good.
many times are you going to have to lean on a transfer quarterback coming from a junior college to where your program has to be good? Let's get a guy in there for Auburn that can play for 4 years, that can be a franchise style of guy, that can play out freshman to senior year and can turn around your 4 years. That to me is the biggest key for him.
And with all due respect, the backup quarterback that's sitting right now, Malik Willis, is not an elite prospect. I mean, Willis may be an okay college player, but this is not some elite prospect.
Yeah.
That's not a rebuttal to what you're saying. I don't think Willis is that kind of player.
Right. I think you could look at Malik Willis and compare him to some of the other quarterbacks that Gus Malzahn has had that weren't very good.
But you bring up an interesting point, and obviously, we're not really in an off-season vibe right now. We're still heavy in recruiting. We got bowl season, but pretty soon we will be in an off-season vibe, and pretty soon the conversation sort of reboots. And I am curious: are Auburn fans going to have bragging rights against Georgia and Alabama? Because they did get a victory against both teams. Now, Georgia got the one that mattered against Auburn. They actually won the rematch. Alabama's not going to get that chance, but they are in the college football playoff. I mean, how much does that bragging right for Auburn stick of, hey, we beat both the SEC teams in the college football playoff? Does anybody want to hear that, or does that fall on deaf ears?
I don't think Auburn has bragging rights right now over Georgia. I think that Georgia came back and did so on a neutral field and were able to proclaim themselves as SEC champions and really in the game that mattered they were able to get back. Right now, though, they do have bragging rights over Alabama. You can say whatever you want to of an Auburn fan that you beat Alabama. Alabama was good. You're able to go in there and beat them. Now, if Alabama comes back and is able to win a national title, if all of a sudden it's an Auburn team that beat Alabama and Alabama still wins a national title, then I think things start to even out. But right now, Auburn, to me, has the upper hand over talking trash to Alabama.
Yeah, let me move on here and remind you that AT&T is a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make the switch to AT&T Wireless and DirecTV. They'll help you stay connected all season long. Item number 7, to get back to LSU here for a moment. LSU dealing with what I think is a pretty significant position coach loss, as Jeff Grimes, the offensive line coach for the Tigers, is leaving to become BYU offensive coordinator. And as far as what this might mean for the Tigers, I thought Nick Suss over at SECCountry.com kind of laid it out pretty succinctly about why this might matter for the folks in Baton Rouge. He says the Tigers have 4 offensive linemen committed for 2018, including a top-rated JUCO tackle, Badera Traore, and I hope I didn't butcher that last name almost,
Probably so.
although I almost surely did. Also, Louisiana's top offensive lineman, Cameron Wire. Holding on to those commits will be huge for LSU, especially given the way LSU's offensive line depth ravaged going into the 2017 season. And you talk about the guys that can also declare for the NFL draft, like Will Clapp and Garrett Brumfield and Toby Weathersby. They're all draft eligible. Nick Suss says losing a position coach could be a swaying factor for those guys. You're a great person to talk to about this because you played in the college level along the offensive line and in the NFL as well. If you were either considering staying at a school or considering going to a school, how much would the departure of an offensive line coach have mattered to you?
I think it's a pretty big deal. When you look at what Jeff Grimes has been, I mean, this guy has been the run game coordinator. He's meant a lot to what LSU has been offensively. With that being said, I don't think in this particular instance it becomes a big deal as far as recruiting. I don't think they stand to lose any of these guys because of the loss of Jeff Grimes. He's going to go on to BYU. He's going to do good things. They're going to plug and play somebody else in his spot. And I think you hit the ground running. I think when you talk about guys who are in your backyard, when you talk about JUCO guys, they've already formed enough relationships, in my opinion, with Ed Orgeron and Matt Canada to not kind of have everything hinge on Jeff Grimes being a part of this program. And I think that when you talk to these guys and when it comes down to signing day, I think they'll have a complete list of guys. Now, I do think it's a big deal for LSU looking into the future, whether or not Will Clapp and Toby Weathersby and guys like that do leave for the NFL. Weathersby obviously has already been out there kind of asking for his draft grade. That's going to be a big deal with what LSU is next season along the offensive line. But in terms of signing day, I just don't feel like when you look at these guys that they have on board right now, I don't see any of these guys jumping ship.
Tyler Mann, the comment section, does point out that James Craig, the line coach for the LA Chargers, a Chargers assistant, is going to become the offensive line coach here for LSU, and that's obviously an NFL pedigree. But the one thing I'm a big believer in, whether it's LSU or any other school in the SEC, it's the relationships that matter. And the idea that just because you have an NFL pedigree, you're going to walk in and all of a sudden develop a rapport because these players want to get in the NFL. To me, that's shortchanging what truly matters. It's the trust that families put in these position coaches. And listen, attrition and coaches moving on, especially to become offensive coordinators, that's just a fact of life in college football. And it may not it may not cost them a whole lot tangibly, but there's definitely some second guessing that's going on either for current players in the roster or guys considering joining.
Well, I agree with you, and I think that you take a look at it. But let me tell you what I think happens here. We're so close to this first signing day. I mean, what are we, a week away? A little less than a week away from this first December 20th signing period. I think that you look at it and go, man, we're losing a good offensive line coach, and Jeff Grimes is heading out to BYU. What are we going to get in return? And you look at Craig and say, okay, he is coming from an NFL team. In this short amount of time, I don't know if you can be proven that he is a great coach, but I don't know if you can prove that he's a terrible coach. And so I think that if you're swaying either way, you say, you know what? This guy's coming from the Chargers. He obviously knows what a good offensive line looks like. I only have a week to make this decision. I think I'll stick with what I know in LSU and Ed Orgeron and continue on my path.
I don't know who Chris Carlson's favorite team is, but he says, I'd rather clean a truck stop toilet than talk about LSU. That's a pretty descriptive comparison there.
Yeah, man. Wow, that's some bad times at truck stops. Huh?
That's actually pretty funny. Item number 8 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So Terrell Davis, Hall of Fame, Pro Football Hall of Famer, former running back at Georgia, goes on Sirius XM Satellite Radio, the ESPNU channel there, and he's making his prediction for the Rose Bowl game between Georgia and Oklahoma. It's not a surprise that Davis thinks Georgia's going to win, but it's the nature of his final score, Mike, that I want to get an opinion from you on. Here's Terrell Davis talking about why he thinks the Dogs get it done in the Rose Bowl.
I got to be a little biased here. I'm hoping that it plays out like this, where Georgia's defense, which I saw in the SEC championship, just looked phenomenal, and they have pretty much the entire year. Now they're going to have their hands full, no question about it. But if they can play defense, the old sort of adage, play defense, run the football. Young quarterback, just make enough plays to win this game, which I think will happen. I see Georgia pulling this thing off. It'll be a close game. I'm predicting a score of maybe 24-21 Bulldogs.
So he says 24-21.
Yeah.
Georgia wins Oklahoma against what I think of as a really low-scoring game. Now, I know that David Pollack, the ESPN analyst, is on the record as saying that Oklahoma is definitely getting 30 in this game, that if Georgia wants to win, it's got to go north of 30. Do you think there's any chance that the Sooners could be held below 30, the way that Terrell Davis suggests there on ESPNU Radio? I mean, is there a chance this game is lower scoring than some people realize or assume it's going to be? I think the over-under total somewhere in the neighborhood of 60.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a chance. And I think it's, in my opinion, if I'm just kind of breaking down this game, now I'm not going to go out there and say, 35-31 in these high-scoring games. I think there's a possibility of that. I think there's a big chance, in my opinion, that Georgia holds Oklahoma under 30. And it goes back to the old saying, in my opinion, that offense wins games and defense wins championships. I think that once you get to this level, that Oklahoma's rolled over so many teams offensively, I don't know that offenses are incapable of just scoring on everybody. I think that once you have a month to prepare, and once you get down to where these teams are so good, every team in this college football playoff is so good, that you're going to go up against quality teams. And I don't know that Oklahoma is always going to have an answer for the speed they're going to see from Georgia. I don't know that Georgia's defense is as good as it will be under Kirby Smart. I don't know if they've reached that peak. I think that Oklahoma is as good offensively as they're going to be under Lincoln Riley. I think there's a chance that Kirby Smart puts together a game plan, if they play the way they did against Auburn a couple of weeks ago, that Oklahoma just gets knocked off kilter. That they come out and just aren't expecting what hit them in the mouth. And now I'm not saying that was going to happen. I just think that there's definitely the opportunity that game plan gets put together.
Greg Steele says no way, 35+ for Oklahoma. Raymond Cox says take the over in the game. It's actually Raymond, one of the reasons why I bring this up, because he brought this subject up on my earlier show, Dog Nation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, which, by the way, if you're not a Georgia fan, you would absolutely hate. I mean, trust me, that's a lot of Georgia talk. If you're not a dog fan, you're not going to like that. But Raymond is, and he was in the comment section talking about that. And actually, it kind of got Michael, one of our producers on this show, he and I were talking about this earlier today as well, that he and I kind of agree, I think the winner of this game is in the 30s.
Yes.
I think the loser of this game may be held
20s.
below.
I agree.
So, Georgia may be able to hold Oklahoma below 30, but I don't think Georgia's winning unless it scores 30.
I agree with you. And I think the winning score to me looks somewhere like Georgia 35, Oklahoma 24, Oklahoma 28. That's kind of the way I see this game playing out. And you can look at the over-under and you can look at 60. You can take the over all day. I think that it would have to be a special day at Georgia defensively if their offense does not score 30 or above.
All right, item number 9, AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10. So I got to ask him, when you went to the Rose Bowl in 2009,
Yeah.
Sugar Bowl in 2008. What kind of bowl gifts you get back then?
Oh man,
It's sort of pre-technology.
yeah, we got we had this thing where it was like
you had a Discman.
we had iPod, like the first generation iPods.
Really?
We went to the Cotton Bowl one year.
Held like 40 something.
They had these things, like some years they would just hand you whatever the bowl gift was. And there was other years where you had like a point system and you could walk in almost like a store in the hotel.
Wait, how do you accumulate points?
Well, they just hand you points. It's like, hey, 6 points. Okay, there's like a recliner that costs like 6 points.
Now,
or you get like a stereo surround system that was 3
Are
points.
the kids that Saban's processing out of the program, they get the same number of points?
So everybody's getting the same number of points. Everybody starts like whatever, 120, 130 kids. I know. Listen, keep tossing shade at Nick Saban. Kirby Smart's doing the same things over at Georgia right now. The same things. You're clamoring for all the same things over there right
Anyway,
now. Learn from the best.
The reason why I bring this up is because Kentucky actually captured some really cool video. Their players going to the Music City Bowl in Nashville, and they got a chance to get their bowl gifts. And apparently they had a chance to sort of choose from a whole array of stuff.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, I'm already pretty jealous of guys who get to play football in the SEC. Here's another reason to be jealous. Take a look at a little bit of this.
Yeah, here it is. Here's the store right here.
Yeah, so this is like the shopping room.
Yeah. You get
where they get to choose.
See the points are on the table. Do you see those?
43.
See, you get like some of them are 6 points, some are 5 points.
This sort of reminds me of the episode of The Entourage where, like, you know,
Is that a vinyl player? Was that a vinyl player?
I guess it's like a
Wow.
a Yeti cooler.
Yeah. So you can see the points on the table. Like those sunglasses are probably 2 points.
PS4.
PS4 is probably 5 points. Something's probably 1 point. You get to shop for your own, do your own deal.
I don't get the recliner.
There's some bowl games where they just let you loose in Best Buy with like a gift card. I mean, I always thought that was pretty cool.
So anyway, that's enough of that. But like, how awesome is that?
Yeah, it's cool. It really is cool.
Like a shopping spree.
I
like
still
this
have
is
a lot of
amazing.
my bowl gifts, and a lot of my buddies did get recliners from the Rose Bowl, and I have surround sound systems, and you name it. I've still got a bunch of them.
Jordan White says record players are cool again, y'all. Listen, I may be a square, but at least I know about that. I know all about vinyl.
Yeah, I got a vinyl as a Christmas present the other day.
Did you really?
Yeah, I got an Eric Church vinyl as a Christmas
Good for you. Yeah, so I am too square to know what a roach is, but I'm not too square to know that vinyl is cool.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm completely on board with the vinyls being cool again. I don't know why you want your sound to sound worse than.
No, it sounds better.
Maybe it does.
Digital sounds compressed.
Yeah, maybe so. I don't know. I'm on board with it. I think. Like I said, I got one.
What would you have
a
picked
vinyl
out
player
from
in
that we just saw? What would you have chosen?
I don't know. There's some cool headphones. Recliner. I did not actually get the recliner when I was out at the Rose Bowl, and I regret it.
Would you have to carry it out of the room?
No, well, they would ship it back to your house. I had a recliner at the time. I didn't want it.
Anyway, all right. Item number 10: AT&T SEC Country Life 1st and 10. And I hate to tell you, I told you so. But this is one of those topics where I've got to tell you, I told you so. I've been telling y'all for a while that Les Miles is never coaching again. Ever coaching again. And I think the evidence that we need for this actually comes from Les Miles himself. I mentioned ESPNU, the Sirius XM satellite radio channel. Les Miles was a guest. And this, to me, gets super awkward. Now, before we play the audio, let me ask you. You've heard it, right?
Yeah.
Is it as awkward as I think it is?
It's pretty awkward because I don't know why Les Miles is so honest. I don't know why he's so honest. Like, find a way to just scoot around some of these questions, or quit taking interviews right now.
Yeah. So here's what you're going to hear: Marcus Spears, who played for Miles, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Marcus Spears.
I know he played for Nick Saban. I don't know if he transferred over.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, he played LSU. I forget what year it was, but Spears, who played for LSU, certainly got reverence for Les Miles. Said, "So, Coach, how many of these job offers have you been getting during this wild coaching carousel?" And Les Miles' answer is nothing but sad. Take a listen.
How many teams reached out to you to be the head coach at their schools, Coach?
None, not one.
Wow.
Be the head coach, offer the job, say, hey, listen, I want you to be my head coach. Not one.
So, by the way, Cliff Nelson does let us know that Spears played for Saban, not Miles. But you hear Les Miles there say, not one single offer, nobody's offered me this whatsoever. Does he not know that lying is a thing and occasionally you can do that? Or
It's a white lie. It's a white lie.
As we say on the media world, like spin control. Just sort of spin it up. Oh, I've had lots of conversations with a lot of folks. Nothing was quite right from my perspective. That's all you got to say. You don't say, even if it's true, you don't say, hey, you know what?
No.
I didn't get offered any job.
I would have said something like, my agent's been really busy. He's been burning up the phone lines right now. I don't want to discuss any specifics, but, we'll talk about that at a different time.
Yeah, exactly. There's some stuff that, I'm excited about, but the timing wasn't just right. But this is the same thing he said about being a broadcaster.
Yeah,
it took him forever to get a broadcast job, and he kept talking about how he was passed over these broadcast jobs too. Is he just the most honest person in the world?
I guess he is, and to me, I don't understand why nothing's opened up for him. And we've talked about it a couple times. Louisiana Lafayette job is open. Like, why? That to me is like a slam dunk for Les Miles. Get back in the profession.
I'm going to give you all the proof you need. Because when he goes into interviews, this is the way that he talks. Now listen to Miles answer this question, or just sort of ramble on about nothing, and picture yourself in a job interview just sort of dozing off. Here's Miles.
So what's the game plan going forward, Coach? I know you want to get back into this thing. What type of situation would you be looking for to enter in and being back on the sidelines as a head coach? Your career has been illustrious. You're a great coach. People have been interested in you. What is that? Is there a particular situation, or what's your thoughts on that?
My experience is to be the head coach. It's I enjoy the job that we're doing right now. I think this is fun. I think the opinion of college sports and the opinion of sports is a fuel that can make a lot of people excited, and especially before a game or during a game. But the most important thing is what we all went through, and we had a coach that took us from.
He's not even like halfway done with this answer, by the way.
That's bad.
Hometown.
So anyway, so like this answer just goes on and on and on forever. Like this is the way he's talking in these job interviews.
Yeah,
he got turned down for the Purdue job.
And I got to tell you, listen, I was a part of the committee at my old high school that hired the new coach, and we had a couple of guys like this that you're just like, I'm not sure what this guy's talking about.
Oh, he's like the worst high school teacher you've ever had.
Yeah,
he's like trying to explain like dynamic pentameter to you or something like that. It's just like the worst teacher you've ever had.
And I don't understand it too, because to me he has a personality that's very personable, that you feel like you know the guy. I would think that way, that you feel like you know the guy just by talking to him for a few minutes. But listening to that, now I feel like that's a big clue to me.
I honestly think that's why he's not a head coach.
Yeah, probably so.
I just think he's lost the ability to interview. All right, so we have, and every day at the time we do this, we kind of get ready to close out our show with our AT&T Look Ahead. Before we do the Champion of Life, we always do our AT&T Look Ahead, taking a look at some of the big things happening around the world of the SEC. Well, today we have sort of an action-packed look ahead, because this Saturday you actually have a couple of good SEC basketball games, and the first bowl games also start on Saturday as well. So can we run through some of this here real quick?
Love it.
All right, let me start with the basketball here. A couple good games, including Virginia Tech against Kentucky, 8th ranked Wildcats there at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. In Florida, after kind of getting back to its winning ways, traveling to Clemson at 4:30. Not a bad pair of basketball games, right?
No, I'm going to be glued to the TV Saturday, and I hope my girlfriend's not listening to that because she's going to be mad at me. But I'm going to be watching these bowl games. I can't wait till bowl season kicks off, and SEC basketball season, pre-SEC season. I think there's some good stuff.
All right, let's rattle through some of the bowl games here. Starting on Saturday, Grambling, North Carolina A&T get us going in the Celebration Bowl. Then you got the New Orleans Bowl between Troy and North Texas. How about the Cure Bowl down in Orlando between Western Kentucky and Georgia State? Throw the records out the window when those two teams get together. You got a ranked team playing on Saturday. You got Boise State against Oregon in Las Vegas. Tell me you wouldn't watch that.
Georgia State, is this not their opportunity for their first bowl win? I think Georgia State.
They've been to a bowl before.
They've been to one before. Yeah. I think they lost. I think they're trying to go for their first ever bowl win.
How about Mike Bobo and Colorado State heading into New Mexico to take on Marshall?
A couple of juggernauts.
And then the Camellia Bowl between Middle Tennessee State and Arkansas State. Do you know where the Camellia Bowl is taking place?
Am I going to go with Montgomery on that?
Montgomery, Alabama, Crampton Bowl.
The Crampton Bowl.
True story. In a previous life, I used to do high school football play-by-play. Did a game in the Crampton Bowl in Montgomery.
This year. Yeah, I did one this year back in August.
Well, there's a point of the story. We're not comparing resumes. The point of the story is the Camellia Bowl in Montgomery. Babe Ruth played a baseball game there.
No kidding.
It's got nothing to do with nothing.
It's like literally a quarter mile from Alabama State Stadium. I'm like, why couldn't y'all just have come up with a way to play both these games that both play? I don't know. But
so anyway, those are the bowl games. Fill out you got a confidence pool suggestion for us on any of those?
I don't. Yeah, I need to get mine together. I really do need to get in a bowl pick'em. I've done one every year. I'm not in one right now, but I'll get it together.
Bo Molinari says, speaking of basketball, did you catch the absolute hammering of Savannah State by the Aggies? Listen, Texas A&M off to a really good start this season. I know Bo's really excited about that. All right, let's get ready to close out the week, though, the way we always do. Every show, our champion of life, we're always looking for them. And Today, it's one of the weirdest ones we've had in a while. This one may be a little bit more weird than funny, but there's this like hipster dude up in Brooklyn who like works at a coffee shop. That's what he is. He's like a hipster guy. And he's getting a tattoo of, well, do we have a picture? Can we show the picture of the, so this is what he's getting. This number 2 in this couch is in honor of former Kentucky quarterback Tim Couch, who was a Browns quarterback for a few years and had like a 22-25 record, something along the lines as starting quarterback. But this guy's got this Tim Couch tattoo. What makes it weird is the guy just got it this week.
What?
This is a true story. This guy just got the tattoo of Tim Couch, the former Wildcats quarterback, and he got it this week.
I'm so dumbfounded by that.
So the guy's like, I'm telling you, this like sort of his like quirky hipster thing to do here. He's like a coffee shop guy in Brooklyn. Some SB Nation writer found him and he told him the story, and that's how he ended up being written about this.
Absolutely terrible. Absolutely terrible.
I mean, how good of a football player would someone have to be for you to get a tattoo of them?
It'd be impossible. I wouldn't even get one for myself or anybody I played with.
This guy's not even from Ohio.
Yeah. Listen, I would love to have some background. Maybe somebody can shed some light.
I'll tell you what the moral of the story is. The folks up north the other day were making fun of the Alabama folks who voted for Nick Saban in the Alabama Senate race. That thing up in New York is way weirder than the Alabama folks voting for Nick Saban.
Yeah,
way weird.
That's some weird upstate stuff right there. I have no explanation for what's going on there.
Well, one way or another, we're glad you joined us for AT&T SEC Country Live today. Make sure you check out our podcast. You can find the audio version of the show right away here on iTunes. We'll get it up and running for you there. Also, share this show with your friends on Facebook. Let them know we're talking about the SEC each and every day here on AT&T SEC Country Live. That wraps us up for the week. We'll be back, though, Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. We will see you then right here on AT&T SEC Country Live.